I'm Rick, and welcome to Wood.Work.LIFE. Today, I'm going to try to show you how to hand-cut dovetails. If this is your first time finding me in Wood.Work.LIFE, please take a second to subscribe below, click the alarm icon to be notified anytime I make new videos. Today's video, we're going to look at how to hand-cut dovetails using simple tools and techniques. All it really takes is practice, precision, and patience. So without further ado, let's try and see if we can't figure one of these out. So now that we have our stock prepared and square, it's time to lay out for the dovetails. Normally I do this a lot finer with a lot thinner pins, something more like this. But in this case, since it's just kind of going to be a tutorial video, I'm going to lay out sort of a carpenter's dovetail where you have equal sized pins and tails. This will also be a good practice joint for anyone who's trying to work on this themselves to put together. So the first piece I like to lay out with dividers. So we'll do our half pin there, we'll do that width, we'll do one same width over there. And we'll do the width of our tails, will be that, whatever that is. Then we just have the space in the middle. And you can center this by eye or do it precisely if you're batching out a bunch of stuff. I'm just going to do it by eye in this case. Just give myself some room to work on the pins to either side. All right, so now we have our 3 dovetails laid out. And this is where that Veritas marking block that I like so much comes in. In this case, I'm using 1:8 since I'm working in walnut. I use the square edge here to mark out the top edges of each of my tails. That. All right, so now we have all our tails marked out. And now I can use this to go ahead and mark out the tails themselves. So, and then mark the other edge of the tail. So there's going to be our waist right there and right there. So this, you want to make sure you score the fibers so you get a nice crisp shoulder line for your dovetails. And this is why it's so important to have square and straight stock, because you need to use all those edges as reference surfaces at some point or another. So there's the depth marked out. So now that I have that figured out, I want to figure out which face I want to be my face grain. And I like this face a little bit more, so I'm going to mark this as TI, tails inside. That way I know which side to cut into. Now that we're all laid out for the tails, we're ready to cut. Some people like to level this board so they can train their hand to go square. I just like to follow the lines. The most important line is on this cut is going to be the line on top to make sure that you're square to the board. So I always like to establish that top cut first. Then you can use that top cut to follow down your angle line that you marked. Don't cut into your shoulder because that makes your dovetails look very rookie. When I do this, I probably 80% of the time cut right into the line. Sometimes I regret it, and that's when I usually cut them. That's when I usually pair to the line. So now that we have our tails cut, we want to go back and cut out our half tails. This is easy enough to do by hand. You just use a marking knife and reinforce your gauge line. Then come back through and cut yourself a little knife wall by just chipping out that piece of wood next to it. Then you can drop your saw right into that wall, right in that knife wall, and use that ledge that you just made as a reference. And just follow your line to get a nice square cut. This just takes a little bit of practice to get pretty good at, but you can make a nice square shoulder cut without much effort. So that's pretty good. Not too bad. Go to the other side, cut out the other half pin. Again, take your marking knife, drop it in your gauge line, just reinforce it a little bit, and then just strip away that little bit of wood next to it to make yourself a knife wall. Put the rest of the saw against that ledge you just made, and then follow your line. Next, you want to remove the waste between your dovetails to give yourself a little more room to work. The easiest way I found to do this with a coping saw, don't go into your kerf, go next to it so that you don't mess up the edge of that dovetail or split out on your work. And this takes a little bit of getting used to with using a coping saw, but once you're comfortable with it, it's pretty easy to just cut a little pyramid in the middle so you have a lot less to do with your chisel later. Cut the other side. Alright, so now that we got the bulk of the waste cut out with the coping saw, you can see we kind of have the little pyramids there to still cut out. You want to put it on a nice clean spot on your bench with no chips to dent the other side of the wood. And go at it with a narrow chisel. So you don't want to drop right into your gauge line right off the bat. You want to kind of chop out half at a time. So just take your chisel hammer and cut out about halfway down to your gauge line at a time. You're on 2 to 3 steps, but you know the more patient you are, the more clean your work's going to look. So in this case, I'm going probably 3 cuts to get down to that baseline. And don't go all the way through. You want to just cut about halfway down so that you don't blow out the other side. All right. Now I'm ready to go right into my gauge line. And here's a trick, is just go a little tap perfectly square just so you have a nice square shoulder. And then after that, cut in a decent angle just to kind of clear yourself a little room to cover up any errors. Again, another little tap, give a nice square shoulder, and then undercut behind that. Over, quick, other side, make sure on the bench. Again, quick release, half the time. And keep working your way down that gauge line. Alright, and again, now that we're right to the gauge line, put your chisel in there, perfectly square, give it a little tap, just to establish that square edge. A little tap. Tap, 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 as Adam Sandler would say. And then go back behind it and undercut it just a little bit. Your joinery doesn't need to be perfect, it needs to look perfect. So that's how you achieve that. All right, so we use the narrower chisel to clear out the waste. Now we're going to use a chisel that's at least as wide as the tails are for paring. That way we get a nice straight line. So I like to get right down on the work for this. Just pare away a little bit at a time until you get to the line you're going for. I'm really just paring off the fuzzies on the ones that I sawed. That way I can have a nice clean fit at the end. Again, kind of the same concept as clearing your baseline, just when you're paring like this. Actually probably cut away like a third at a time as opposed to half, but same concept, just sneak up on that measurement. So there's our dovetails all cleaned up. All right, so now that we have our tailboard cut, let's start working on the pin board a little bit. We'll start with the same thing. Go ahead and mark out the edges. Mark out the depth with your gauge. Score all the fibers. Now we'll have half pins here, so we don't need to go all the way to the edge, and we won't need to cut anything off the corner here. We'll also want to figure out what's going to be our face side. So it looks like this board has a little bit of a crack in it, more on this side than the other side. I'll probably throw this out normally, but since it's just a sample dovetail for practice, I'll go ahead and use this one. But I'll say this is the PI, the pins inside, so it's got the worst edge of the crack on here. Use a hand plane with square edges. In this case, I've got my Veritas number 4. We'll drop this into the vise. We'll lay the tailboard on this plane. Once you get that all locked in, you make sure that your edges are flush, and you use a marking knife, because now the precision is very important, and we'll mark out the edges of our tails. So you start by just a really delicate cut and a little bit harder one, just enough to score that wood. Go both sides of all of your tails. Another nice thing about marking the inside and outside is that when this goes together, we know that inside board here and the inside board there will match up. Again, we'll mark our waist. We know we're carving out for where the tails are going, so we'll mark out those tails. And then another time that this marking block becomes useful is for marking a square cut line with the cut line that we laid out on top. So just rest your knife into your cut, rock the 90-degree edge of the marking block against the knife, and you have yourself a square edge. Again, you lock it into the cut line, put the block up against it, and just mark down to that scored line you have. So we've got all our pins marked out now. And we have the inside face of the board facing away from us, so that any blowout will go away from us. Like I said, so we've marked our waist, and we know we want our saw kerf to go inside that waistline against the knife line we made. So we'll go ahead and make our first cut here. We're gonna make sure we go down square and track both the line on top that matches the dovetail that we're marking against, and that our blade goes down square to the wood. Just patience, and let the saw do the cut, and let your body's natural alignment take you down square. Hopefully. Some of this stuff takes some practice. All right, and since we're really working on precision here, I like to just get the ones that are at the same angle done at the same time. Slow and steady. And then you come back and cut the other ones. Now, the more relaxed you are, the better this is going to turn out, so don't stress cut this a whole lot, just take it slow and patient. So we've got all our pins cut. Doing the same as we did with the tails, we're going to come back in with the coping saw and remove the waist. Make sure you're on the right side of your waistline there. Make sure you scribble, cutting only the stuff you scribbled up. One side. Both sides, you got your nice little pyramid. Same thing as the other two. There we go. So that's the bulk of our waist there. You can see here where that little piece is just flipping right off. We'll see if we can salvage anything out of this. So now we just got a little more to clear out on those tails. So we'll go ahead and chisel that out. Now you could see, remember, that the bottom part of your dovetail is the narrower part. So I like to do that part on top first. That way you don't have to start angling your chisel right away. And that way when you start angling your chisel, you know if you're going the right angle because the wood on the other side will just pop right out. So here I will use a 1/2" chisel because you don't want to go the full width with a 3/4, and you don't want to go too narrow to where you can start chipping it away too much. Make sure there's no chips to dent your wood. Have at it. Again, start removing about half at a time. By working from the narrow part of the pin first, it also just kind of gets you into a rhythm where you know when you're going to angle your chisel and when you're not. It's the same, it's just practice. You can do whatever feels comfortable to you. Cut the thick part first if that works better, but it's just how I do it. Again, you're going to do a little tap at the edge and then undercut just a little bit so that you get a nice firm seat. And just work our way down, just clearing out the waste. And the last one. This goes really quick as long as your tools are sharp and you're confident. It just takes practice. Clean our bench off, get the other side. Again, coming back with our 1/2" chisel, being conscious that the edges of these pins slope down. So you want to come in at whatever angle you feel comfortable with. Just sneak up on that angle, obviously. It's going to be safer. But just clearing out your waste. Even if you do chip into the inside of your pin board a little bit at the bottom, it's not going to show up. It's all on the inside of the joint, but just good habits to get into. So now that we got the base lines cleaned up and ready to go, we just want to pare down to our cut lines that we did with the marking knife earlier. You don't want to go all the way in because you want to leave a little bit in there to finesse the fit, but it's pretty easy since you're going into end grain to just pare those straight down, chop them off. You want to make sure that the chisel is perfectly, or at least near perfectly, perpendicular to the board, top of the board. Just ease it down. Come back in with our marking knife. It also works as a great dovetail chisel. And just cut out the bottom of that stuff that we chipped out. Let's see how that fits. See what else we need to do to tweak that fit. We've got our outside and our outside, so we'll go ahead and see how that goes. So you can kind of hear when you tap with a hammer if it's fitting yet or not. So that's fitting, that's not, and that's almost. Need to pare off a little bit more to that marked line that I scored earlier. Just to remove that last little bit of wood to get a perfect fit. Looks like we've got it. Let's see how this fits. I think we're good there. Good there. A little tight there, but should be all right. And you don't want to force it in, so just drop the hammer on it and let it kind of rest its way in. There we go. Not my best work ever, but not bad for in front of a camera. You can see there we got nice flush tails and pins. Little gaps there from where the wood blew out, and so I can clean up that baseline a little bit more to get that totally flush. So with splintery wood, Not too bad of a joint. Looks like we're there. So there's the final product. Not bad for my first dovetail in front of a camera. Definitely not my first dovetail. If your first one doesn't turn out this good, don't be intimidated. Just practice, try again. All it takes is time, confidence, more comfort with your tools, but you'll get there. If I had to send you away with 3 tips, square, straight stock is key. Sharp tools, and really just practice. Practice more than anything. So, thanks for joining me today with Wood.Work.LIFE. If you like what you saw today and you learned something, please take a second to like and subscribe below. And if you could, please take a minute and click the alarm icon so you'll be notified anytime I release a new video. Thanks for joining me today with Wood.Work.LIFE. Remember, keep your tools sharp and keep your mind even sharper. I just wanted to take a second to thank Veritas for making and providing such amazing tools. The dovetail saw you saw in this video is the Veritas dovetail saw with the 20 TPI. It's easy to start and leaves a nice clean cut with a very small kerf. The Utilitas marking knife is great steel and a really convenient shape. And the chisels that you saw in this video were the PM V11 chisels. These take an amazing edge and hold an amazing edge. I've been using this for about a month now and it's still just surgically sharp. I can still shave with the thing. And no joke, this is just the first hone out of the box that's still that sharp. And then, as I told you earlier, these marking blocks are awesome. They're really relatively inexpensive, but being able to get that perfect square and that perfect dovetail mark quickly, it's a real time saver when you hand cut a lot of dovetails.